Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too, as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, live the life we love. It's Thursday, so it's story day. Let's get right into it. This is called The Companions. Last week I talked about the six who made their way through the world, which was a Grimm's fairy tale. This is kind of take off on the same idea. So, how do we begin? Well, once upon a time, in old times, not long ago, but way before anything else really existed, there was an old hag witch who wanted nothing better than to destroy all humanity. And she just so happened to have the most beautiful maiden as a daughter in the world. And so she put out a proclamation that anybody who could fulfill three easy tasks could marry her daughter and become king of the realm. But of course, the tests that she asked people to do were almost impossible. And when the person would fail, she would cut off their head and impale it on the castle wall. Well, there was one prince who heard about the beauty of this maiden, and he so desired to want to win her hand. But when he asked his father, the king, for permission to go, father said, "No, you know what's going on there. Everybody who tries gets killed. You got to take over the family business. There's no way I'm going to let you go and do this." Well, as a result of him not being given permission, he got sick, and he laid in his sickbed for 7 years. And although the king used every resource he possibly could to try to help him, nothing could avail. And then the king realized he's not really sick organically, he's sick at heart. So he gave him permission to go on the mission. And the moment he had the permission, he instantly recovered, as we all do once we're given the authority to go out and face it. So that's the first thing. If you stay in your sick bed, you die for sure. If you get out on the road, you may face death, but at least you get a chance to take the journey. So off he went, and as he's going, all of a sudden he looked on the road. He thought he saw like what would look like a mountain. It was so big, and he tried to walk all around it, but he realized at the end it wasn't a mountain. It was a person's stomach that was breathing. And when he finally walked around the whole big mound, he found that there was the stout one there. He said, "My God, you're a big one." "Yeah, no, you don't even know half the story. I can expand myself 300 times this was." "Wow, I'm going to try to save this princess. You'd like to come along?" He said, "Fine." So now he had the stout one as a companion. They're walking a long way or a short way or whatever time it takes in these stories, and there's a person with his ear pressed to the ground. They said, "What are you listening to?" He says, "I'm listening to the grass grow." "Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I can hear anything going on anywhere in the world." "Can you hear anything going on in the old hag's court?" "Oh, I can. In fact, I just heard a sword separating a head from some shoulders." "Would you like to come with us? I think you could be very, very handy." He says, "Sure." So now he has the stout one and the listener. Then after walking a little further on, they saw some legs, and the legs seemed to extend so far that they couldn't see the rest of the body, which seemed to like trail off into a forest. They kept on walking for a long time, and finally they came to the head, and they said, "Wow, you're a tall rascal, aren't you?" He said, "Oh, no, you don't even understand. I can stretch myself beyond like you wouldn't believe how long I could get." He said, "That's a really interesting quality. Would you like to come with me as I try to save the princess?" So now they got the tall one with him. Then they went on a little further, and they came to a man who had his eyes bandaged. They said, "What do you have your eyes bandaged for? Don't you want to see what's going on?" He said, "You don't understand. If I take off these bandages, anything I set my gaze on, it shatters them into 1,000 pieces." "Oh, well, I think we should take the one who can pierce anything with us." So they took him along too. And then, after another part of their journey, they came to another man who was freezing cold, but it was nice and warm out. And they were saying, "What's wrong with you? You're shaking like an aspen leaf." So, "Oh, you don't understand. When it's hot, I get cold. And when it's cold, it gets hot. I'm just like a man of tempers." He says, "Well, I think you should come along with us." And then finally, they came and they saw one other guy looking out into the horizon. I said, "What are you so eagerly looking for?" He says, "Oh, I can see anywhere into the world at any time." "Oh, master of sight, huh? You see anything in the Queen's court?" Yeah, I just see somebody getting beheaded because he couldn't fulfill the tasks that the old hag wanted." So the prince invited him to come, and now he had all of his companions with him: the stout one, the listener, the tall one, the man of piercing gaze, the man of tempers, and the man who had the deep sight. So they got to the castle, and the witch was very, very happy to see the next person who she thought for sure, "I got him in my control." She says, "Oh, three easy tasks. You ready to fulfill them?" He says, "Sure." So he says, well, she said, I lost my ring. It's at the bottom of the ocean. If you can find that, bring it back to me. That's task number one. How they can find the bottom of the ocean? Even the person with gaze couldn't see where it is. So the stout one says, wait a second, I'll help it. He went over to the ocean and he sucked the whole ocean into his body till it was completely dry. And then the man of sight was able to see it clearly. The tall one was able to extend his arm out, grab the ring, and before you knew it, they presented to the witch. She was surprised that they were able to do it. Says, oh, very interesting. Well, here's a second test for you. There are 300 cattle out there in the field. I want you to eat all of those cattle. You have to eat the hoof, the hide, the skin, the bone, the gristle, everything about them, and then you have to empty the wine cellar. And if there's even one drop of wine left, then your life is forfeit. And the prince says, well, can I have a companion dine with me? He says, yes, but only one. So again, he said to the stout one, finally, I'm able to offer you some food. He said, you're right, I'm really, really hungry. Well, the stout one went out into the field. He wasn't even like cooking the cattle. He was just eating it raw. The flesh, the hoof, the bone, the gristle, the inner organ. It was like gross, disgusting. And then he went to the wine cellar and he drained each wine barrel so much that the casket broke from the dryness till there wasn't a drop left. And then the stout person came back and said, I thought you were serving me lunch. The paucity of the fare. This is just not good for a person like me. And besides, this is how they serve royalty. He was very, very upset. So the prince calmed and said, just wait. Thank you very much for that. So now he went back to the witch and said, well, the second task is done. She thought to herself, I have to get him to my power. All right, here's the third test. Very simple. You need to go up into the tower, and I'll bring my daughter there, and you have to hold my daughter and gaze at her, and all you have to do is keep her there till 12 o'clock in the evening. And if you could do that, she's yours. She says, this is no task. This is a delight. So he went to the daughter. They went up to the tower. They looked into each other's eyes, and they had this beautiful tantric gaze. The moonlight was coming in through the window. It was such a wonderful moment. They knew they were right for each other. And so he informed his companions that there might be some kind of trickery going on. So the tall one wrapped his arms around them both. The stout one guarded at the door, and all of the companions were ready. But then the witch put a spell on them, and everybody fell asleep. And then at 11:45, the spell wore off, and they all woke up, and they realized the daughter was gone. And so immediately the listener said, shh, shh, let me hear what's going on. Because they were quiet, he heard this moaning going on at some distance away from the palace. And then the man of great sight looked and saw, oh, she's chained to this rock, and she can't get out. So immediately the tall one said, I'm taking the man with pierced visiting with me. And so he grabbed him, and with 1-2 steps, he was out there right by the rock. He took the bandage off the man with piercing gaze, and it smashed the rock completely, and then in a thrice, he was back into the castle, putting the princess back into the arms of the prince, just as the witch came in and said, now I've got you. Oh, well, since she realized that her 3 tasks had done, she was about to give the daughter over, but then she whispered, said, listen, you don't know who this guy is. He could be a complete commoner. We don't know who he is. I think you should create a task for him. And so she said, okay. So the princess said, well, you may have satisfied the tasks of my mother, but I have a task for you. He said, gladly. You're going to build a fire, and then you have to jump into that fire, and if you can survive the fire, I'm yours. So he said, can I have somebody sit in for me? And she thought, no one's going to want to sit in the fire for him. She said, sure, anybody can take your place. So this is the time where they asked the man of tempers to go into the fire, and for 3 days the fire raged. And after 3 days, when the fire had died down, there he was, shivering his positives. I couldn't believe I was about to freeze to death. They were all amazed at what he did. And at this point, well, the hag had to give up her claim on him. So off the prince with his companions went, but the hag wasn't satisfied. So, of course, she immediately sent an army after them. And when the listener heard the army was coming, and the tall one saw the army was coming, they turned around to the stout one. They said, can you help us one more time? He said, no problem. So he gave himself the Heimlich maneuver, and he vomited out all of the wine in the ocean till he drowned the whole army. But that wasn't good enough for the hag. So she sent another army after them. And at this point, they say, okay, now we're really upset. So they turned the man of piercing gaze on them. He took off his bandages, and he blew them to smithereens. And at this point, the hag said, forget it, let him go. Well, companions went on a long way or a short way before they said, time to move on. So they embraced each other, thanked each other for their journey, and off they went. Now the prince took the princess, and she didn't know he was a prince, along this route back toward his castle, and he stopped at a village. And he said to the princess, "You wait here. Let me just prepare a place for us." And then he went and told the village what he was doing. And he came back with these dirty garments. He says, "Now you have to take your place as my bride because we're swine herders. And what we do is we move pig waste. That's our life." Oh, and first she was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." But she said, "Well, he risked his life for me, so I'm going to do it." So she lived there for a little while, learning the ways of being a swine herder and moving pig waste as her daily life. And then one day, the villagers came to her and said, "Where's your husband?" She said, "Oh, I think he's down in the market selling pigs and doing what swineherders do, who move pig waste all the time." Uh, well, let's take you to him. So she didn't think anything was up, and so they took her not just to the village, but to the castle. And they walked right into the castle. Nobody checked them, nobody tried to stop them, and they moved right into the audience hall. And there was the prince sitting on his throne, but she didn't recognize him because he wasn't dressed normally. He was dressed in all his royal regalia. And then as she got close to him, and she looked in his eyes, and he looked in her eyes. It was that same gaze that she recognized when they were together in the tower in the moonlight. And then she realized who he really was. And then they made preparation for a great wedding. I hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy yourself. Always feel free to communicate about these stories and the symbols in them. I love to talk about that. And then we'll see you back in 2 weeks for our next Good Vibration class, June 14th, and then following up on June 28th. Have a great day and be in love with life.